E3. So Representative Hansen makes that motion as well as the motion to move House File 906 DE3 amendment to get the bill into the shape that the author would like the bill. Any discussion on those items? There being none, in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. So now, members, we're working off of the DE3 amendment, and for the audience, you will have this as a bill now rather than the numbered bill that was over in the, and I assume that there are copies of the DE3 over on the table if you don't have them already. Representative Hansen to the to the House File 906 as amended.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and I appreciate your explanation. I want to just kind of repeat that for members in the audience that we are now working off the DE3 amendment. The DE3 amendment is based on input that I have received from agencies and a wide variety of sources since the bill was introduced. And so it starts out with Section 1 with a number of definitions, defining local unit of government, defining mining, processing, and silica sand project, temporary storage, transporting. And then on page 2, it has standards and criteria. By October 1st, 2013, the Environmental Quality Board, in consultation with local units of government, shall develop model standards and criteria for mining, processing, and transporting of silica sand. These standards and criteria may be used by local units of government in developing local ordinances. Then we have a listing of standards and criteria all through page 2. On page 3, you have silica sand Technical Assistance Team. By October 1st, 2013, the Environmental Quality Board shall assemble a silica sand Technical Assistance Team to provide local units of government with assistance in ordinance development, zoning, environmental review and permitting, and other issues arising from silica sand mining and processing operations. I have modeled this off from the wetland technical evaluation panels. The technical assistance team shall be comprised of up to 7 members that can be chosen from the following agencies and entities. And the majority of the members must be from a state agency and have expertise in one or more following issues. I have added subdivision 4 that frankly I have taken from Representative Kelly's bill that was similar to my bill and has similar to the technical evaluation panels for wetland. The local government must consider the findings or recommendations in its approval or denial of the project and then give reasons for the disagreement. The effective date is the following enactment. Rules, Section 2. I've received from the Pollution Control Agency copies of rules from the Wisconsin agencies that affect both reclamation and air quality. Minnesota does not have similar rules, so I'm directing the Pollution Control Agency to adopt rules to incorporate those relevant standards into Minnesota rules. And then Section 3 is an appropriation to make sure that this is funded. And that, Mr. Chair, is the bill.
Okay, we'll take brief questions if there are any for members, just if there are any top level. Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hansen, could you just tell me kind of at a high level, what are the differences still between your bill now in its current form and Representative Kelly? Because this is the first time we've seen your new DE3.
Well, Mr. Chair, and Representative McNamara, Representative Kelly's bill was essentially modeled on my bill, and the primary difference is that my bill has the Environmental Quality Board who will be involved, and Representative Kelly's bill sets up a new level of government to handle those processes.
Further questions? Okay, well, Representative Bucklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, under the rules, you said that we're going to incorporate some of the Wisconsin Administrative Code. As far as that goes, the Pollution Control Agency shall adopt the rules to incorporate Wisconsin Administrative Code pertaining to nonmetallic mining. Just how long have those rules been in effect in Wisconsin, and how effective have they been?
Representative Manson.
Mr. Chair and Representative Uglum, I do not have that information in front of me. I can provide that when we come back after session.
Thank you. That'd be very interesting.
Okay, we're going to take the first testifier, Amanda Griggs. If you want to come forward. Ms. Griggs, introduce yourself, who you represent.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Amanda Griggs. I am a resident of the most diverse ecosystem in the state, Houston County of the Driftless region. I have come before you today to express concerns relating to non-metallic mining of industrial silica sand and its adverse effects on the environment. At this time, Wisconsin is struggling to control this industry. Even with the DNR stretched thin, they have still found 80 to 90% non-compliance, including 2 significant runoff incidences of toxic water. These disasters to drinking water do not need to happen. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I respectfully urge your support for the EQB standards. The driftless region's cold water trout streams are a sign of ecological health. According to DNR plant ecologist Ann Pierce, who was sitting up here earlier, quote, "This ecoregion comprises 3% of Minnesota's land area, but provides habitat for 43% of the state's listed plant and animal species. Without strong state regulations, their habitats will be destroyed." The DNR has an extensive aggregate mapping program. What about the hydrological mapping? They are yet to be completed. How can we allow mining permits without understanding the hydrology of the area? And what about our air? There are no exposure standards for the known carcinogen silica dust. Our air will be filled with diesel exhaust, also a toxic element that causes autism in children that are born and unborn. These dangers must be fully understood before mining takes place in our communities. High-quality rivers and trout streams of the driftless region are recognized on state and national levels for their economic and environmental importance. The tourism industry generates $11.2 billion, including $694 million in sales tax, and accounts for close to 250,000 jobs. I believe we must protect this industry. My final point is the increasing concern of climate change. In 2007, the Minnesota legislature set goals to reduce our emissions 15% by 2015. Excessive diesel exhaust, change in land use, and exposure of our water is a setback. When do we draw the line? Do we continue to allow our precious ecosystems to be destroyed to support yet another system that shatters our national environment? I ask you all, please take a stand today. I thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for having a hearing today and hearing our testimony on this House file, and I thank the committee and Representative Hansen.
Okay, Ms. Griggs, Representative Russo, at the very least, has a question for you. Representative Russo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to comment on something for the record. I don't dispute the bulk of the testimony, but the statement about an element causing autism is incorrect. I believe the testifier is probably referring to mercury, and the papers that linked that with autism were falsified. They've been rejected from the original British medical journals in which they were published, and the author of them has been censored by his colleagues.
Thank you, Representative Russo. Any further questions of the testifier? Representative Uglum.
Yes, just one other question. You mentioned that there were no known standards for exposure to silica dust. Where did you get that information, ma'am?
Griggs.
Mr. Chair. Representative, I have been studying this issue for over a year, and as far as there are standards for indoor industry, but as far as exposure into the open air, there are no standards at this point. And I've been studying this and calling the MPCA and all of our agencies and have not found a good answer on this.
Mr. Chair, but in fact, those standards for indoor exposure are based on parts per million in the air, and obviously inside they could be more concentrated and changed through air makeup systems and things like that. Where an outside, it can still be measured at the point of the exposure and everything else. And OSHA, in fact, and I used to deal with this, OSHA, in fact, does control the exposure of silica and crystalline silica dust with workers in many, many industries. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Gregg.
Thank you. I do have to say that the levels at which they are measuring them at this time does not, I believe, adequately address silicosis and the damage that can be done by the size. It's the micron size that we need to look at and have stricter standards. So thank you.
Representative Isaacson?
Nope.
Okay. Someone here from the PCA that can address this specific question? Welcome, Mr. Thornton.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is David Thornton. I'm Assistant Commissioner to the PCA. We have no standards that apply specifically to these kinds of facilities. We have no silica sand standards for ambient air quality conditions. We've asked the health department to develop a health-based value that we can use. It's short of a standard, but it's a formal process that they go through where they look at all the literature and make recommendations to us for safe levels in the air, and they're in the process of doing that. I'm not exactly sure what the time frame is for that.
Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that you may not, but OSHA does under the hazard communication standard and the crystalline silica standard, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Mr. Chairman, OSHA does have, as I understand it, exposure standards for people that work in industrial situations. I don't think it's just for indoors. I think it's just within factory environments. And I'm sorry, I don't know what that number is right now.
Correct. Mr. Chair, I don't know the exposure limits either, or the de minimis concentrations, but it is controlled and regulated under OSHA.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, my understanding, though, is the exposure rates you're concerned about here aren't the work site. You're concerned about the neighborhoods and the surrounding area, correct? So what you're saying is there aren't standards developed for a locale or a city or a surrounding area that is in the area of one of those mines, not specifically to the mine itself. So the general population standards is what we're really talking about here.
Ms. Gregg.
Mr. Chair, thank you. This industry is very large, and for example, there are a lot of transload facilities proposed and getting started in Winona County. Also, the potential for piles of sand to be at an open pit and blowing across the landscape, depending on the wind, the direction, the strength. And these dust particles you cannot see. So it's something that is not well tested, studied, or understood, and it is carcinogenic.
And so I want to just point out that while I'm sure that OSHA has standards for this sort of thing, it's in an occupational safety situation, whereas what she's referring to is a general situation like a home, a residence, an environment, a city, which is entirely different. Thank you.
Any further questions? Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if Commissioner Thornton could come back. Commissioner Thornton, I've just got a question. Do you have the ability to grant permits subject to evaluation, and if you were to come up with a standard in the future, would you be able to make those permits conditional on a standard yet to be determined?
Mr. Thornton.
Mr. Chairman, I'm thinking. What we would probably do in a situation like that is reopen a permit and put new conditions in once a standard was in place.
McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Thornton, so an industrial person or entity wanting to get a permit could agree with MPCA that the permit be subject to air monitoring and that future air monitoring may subject them to some controls yet to be determined?
Mr. Chairman, Representative McNamara, that's correct.
Thank you.
Further questions for Testifier Griggs? Oh, Representative Wagenius.
Thank you for Commissioner Thornton. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know in the area in which I live, in the metro area, there are air monitors that are permanent, and so we have a reasonable basis, not good enough in my judgment, but a basis for knowing what the base is. Do we have any kind of baseline monitoring in these areas which are have the potential to be mined for frac sand?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wagenius, actually, we don't. The last two permits that we've issued, we have put in monitoring requirements. And one of those facilities is the equipment is in place and they're beginning to collect the data now. And Wisconsin, some of the industry in the Eau Claire area has on their own put in some monitors, and some of that information is just coming in. So we really don't have a base of data out there yet. And that's one of the gaps here in this issue.
Yes.
Thank you. Representative Clark has a bill in, I understand, for a mobile unit to do some air quality monitoring. Would that kind of mobile unit be useful in getting some baseline air quality testing in these areas where there's potential for this mining?
Commissioner Thornton.
Mr. Chair, Representative Wagenius, we've taken a good look at that bill, and our recommendation would not be to go with a mobile monitoring device. Our recommendation, if there's an interest in getting additional monitoring data, to put in fixed monitors. They can be moved after a period of time, but they give us an ability to compare completely the data that we're collecting to the rest of our monitoring network and what's being done around the country.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Wagenius.
thank you. Well, if that is not your recommendation, and I thought, if I remember correctly, that was about $400,000, maybe way off. Can you, in a reasonable amount of time, do air quality monitoring so that there is a baseline in these areas that are under discussion?
Mr. Chair, Representative Wagenius, given the resources, we can do monitoring, or we can make it happen, whether it's our work that we do or requiring someone else to do it and monitoring what they do.
Representative Wagenius.
Well, let's talk about the resources then. What do you mean by that? I mean, you're talking about cash, I can tell, but what do you mean by that?
We're drifting very closely into the Environment Finance Committee, and that's where this bill will end up going. But go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wagenius. Well, it would not be just money. We would need probably at least part of an FTE. I believe it's going to be in the order of a few $100,000. I don't have the number in front of me, but it's less than $500,000.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Griggs. James McAlva. And then the next person will be Lynn Schoen. Welcome to the committee. State your name and address, or state your name and who you represent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Jim McElrath, and I'm a Florence Township Board Supervisor in Goodhue County and live in the city of Frontenac. A Florence Township Board has enacted a one-year moratorium last year to get our zoning ordinances and comprehensive plans in line and updated because of the new event of silica frac sand mining. We have nearly completed our work through our efforts, and we realize that we still need some state-level help. Our townships and counties are not up to, other townships and counties are not up to date with their ordinances. Some of them don't even have a comprehensive plan. And due to the immense size of the frac sand industry, their activities cross state lines, city lines, towns, and townships. With our ordinances in line and theirs not in line, the immense traffic will flow through our town and townships, causing hazardous conditions for our residents. In Florence Township, we hit the pause button to deal with the frac sand mining issues and concerns, and we're asking the state to do the same and have a study conducted to establish statewide standards. And after the last testimony, it's pretty obvious to me that those really don't really exist in any kind of solid fashion. The history and behavior of the frac sand mining companies have been devastating in western Wisconsin. And it's already happening in Winona and Wabasha, and we predict that it will go through southeastern Minnesota like a juggernaut unless we take call time out to study the issues. Without action, we'll wake up one morning and look in the mirror and say, what the hell happened? That's how fast they move. Whether you're Republicans or Democrats, we're all Minnesotans, and as a local government, we're asking the state to step up the plate because we need your help. Thank you.
Go ahead.
My name is Lynn Shane. I'm a councilperson on Wabasha City. I represent the city for now. Our town consists of a lot of small businesses. Many of them are dependent on the tourism industry. Where we are located, it's at an interstate bridge and a two-lane highway, Highway 61, and then we've got the rail yard there. We keep hearing at testimonies about these great high-paying jobs that are supposed to be coming our direction. But when you look at where our hospital and clinic sits and the way that people have to come across the bridge to come use our dentists, our retailers, our everything else, we're looking, one of our concerns is that people aren't going to come to our town. Our town is only 2,500, but our drawing area is 10,000. When you clog up the bridge, you clog up the highway. With the number of trucks we're talking about high-paying jobs having to be laid off. We've got assistants, dental hygienists, nurses, doctors that are not going to have the patient base that they're going to need. In all of the testimony I've sat through for the last couple of weeks, there are still questions people can't answer, and that's what I'm here to just, if you can answer this at the end of everything is said and done, great. But right now, nobody's been able to provide answers. One is the acceptable particulate matter size and volume before the air does become an issue for silicosis. We don't have ambient air quality measurements. You just heard that. Second is how much silica sand can we lose from our aquifer before it starts really affecting our water levels. We're in a drought in southern Minnesota. A lot of the water is stored in the sand system. It acts as our filter. My question is, how much sand can you take and still guarantee our water supply? Thirdly, how much traffic can a neighborhood tolerate in terms of diesel emissions? This transload facility that I'm talking about that exists in Wabasha is situated right in the middle of the neighborhood, and we already, as a town, rank in the top 15% for the state for diesel emissions. We're in a river valley that makes this a especially critical issue for breathing concerns such as asthma. 4, who is going to monitor and then hold accountable the businesses that are non-compliant? We just heard that over in Wisconsin, DNR said in an article in the La Crosse paper that between 80 and 90% of the silica sand businesses are non-compliant. Many of those vendors are from Minnesota. Who's going to monitor them? Who's going to hold them compliant? We don't have a training program for our police departments. We don't have any direction in our small town about how do we hold them compliant and what is our recourse. We need more information on that. And 5, how many people will choose not to do business or vacations in Wabasha because they don't want to deal with the noise and traffic? And then how many small businesses will be collateral damage because of that decline? As I said, we are tourism based. We have a lot of B&Bs, outdoor canoe rentals, lots of restaurants, that kind of thing. In Wabasha County alone, which is a very small county, we have 650 jobs just for tourism. And 6, how much revenue is the state prepared to lose because of loss of our property values? And the second question to that is, how do you plan to make up that lost income? Why would we like to see an extensive environmental study to address some of the above questions? Because no one has answers to these yet. There isn't a standard this is not a standard metallic mining business like the aggregate companies will come up here and tell you to believe. This is a non-metallic mining issue. Someone has to ultimately be responsible to monitor and enforce these businesses. We must have a state permitting process in addition to our local conditional use permits, so this is looked at in a comprehensive manner. It's going to take a statewide moratorium so we have enough time to establish this permitting process. The scope and magnitude of the silica sand mining and transport businesses demand that we get this right. Why are you in such a hurry? Let's slow it down. Thank you.
Any questions? Welcome to the committee. Identify yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Jody McElrath, and I think my name was on the same line as James McElrath, so I'm here to testify, hoping that I wasn't bypassed. I'm from Florence Township. I'm a planning commissioner, and I'm also the chair of Save the Bluffs, a citizens group. So thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I want to first thank Representative Hansen for introducing the bill. It's very important as a step in obtaining our much-needed help from the state for the silica frac sand mining. We must work together to strengthen this bill to accomplish the required controls on this potentially invasive and uncontrolled industry. I'd like to call your attention to a 4-page handout that I asked to be put into your packets today. It's full of facts. A lot of studies have already been completed. There's a lot of facts already on frac sand issues, and these would help to expedite the effort and timeline of the studies that we're asking for. We also need, in addition to that, some time out. Let's try not to allow new permitting on those mines that may be asking for permitting during this time where a study can be completed. And that way we can get our standards as we've been asking for, and local governments just don't have the resources to establish those standards. We need them at the state level. The sand companies will have many arguments against our requests. They argue that adequate standards and regulations are already in place. It's important to note that most of those standards and regulations were intended for construction sand, aggregate sand mining, processing, and transport. This is a very, very different business. The mining companies will also claim that the air quality standards are in place. As far as I know, the PM10 is about the smallest micron size that is being evaluated right now. It's the 2.5, 3 to 2.5 micron size that is the invisible threat. They'll also argue that they provide jobs. The fact is, most of their jobs required skilled mining workers, most of whom are imported. At best, some trucking jobs would be the economic outcome. I also remind you to look at the handout on the socioeconomic impacts. There are many facts and figures on tourism and so on in that handout. We can't trust our current standards to a whole new industry with significantly different type of operations. I want to remind you, as Lynn did, about the several accidents, the track record of the Wisconsin mines, and their several noncompliance issues. Let's put some teeth into this bill before frac sand mining bites us. Let's take a time out, get the studies done, and get the standards. I thank you.
Any questions? Thank you. And we're in recess. Be back about 20 minutes after session. Well, we're in recess now, right there.